Welcome to the Nitschke podcast. Today, very excited. We've got Tom Gilbert here from Adelaide Hills Toyota.
Thank
Tom.
you, Michael. Thrilled to be here. It's
yeah.
a great initiative that you're holding here.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no
It's
worries.
wonderful to see you. Your business is a fantastic, very well-respected, well-known business
Thank
locally.
you.
Congratulations. For anyone in our audience that hasn't heard of you or
Yep.
Adelaide Hills Toyota,
Yep.
let's hear about it.
Okay. Well, thank you. First, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here. Very professional setup.
Thank you.
I'll just turn my phone onto silent.
It's all good, mate.
So Adelaide Hills Toyota is really only a relatively recent acquisition for our family business.
Yes.
We start. My great grandfather started our business in Strathalbyn in the late 1800s.
It's amazing.
And he manufactured bicycles.
Is that
and
right?
that first picture there I'll show you is a Gilbert and Son is the first shop.
Oh, wow.
That's on High Street. That's actually Malang, I believe.
Okay.
They started in Malang, and they made bicycles because I'm not sure if you knew, but horses were quite. Bicycles were seen as a very was almost a posh way of travelling. They're quite expensive. But here's an ad for a bicycle. That's in the Southern Argus in 1936.
Okay.
And the bike was £5.
Right.
So it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you could actually take terms on your bicycle, so you could actually borrow money through us.
Afterpay.
Yeah, exactly right. So bicycles were the foundation. They moved. My great grandfather moved to Strathalbyn in the early 1900s, and in 1926 they acquired the license to sell General Motors products, which was things like Buick, Chevrolet, Pontiac, and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
That's an old Chevy ad.
Wow.
From the PO Box 18. It was High Street, Strathalbyn, which we still own the property.
Of course.
So 1926, we took on a licence to sell General Motors products. But that was on the proviso that we opened a shop in Mount Barker. So my great-grandfather sent his son, my grandfather Roy, to Mount Barker in 1926 in a buckboard ute, and he put him up in the hotel across the road.
Okay.
In the Barker Hotel.
Barker.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he built on the corner of Gawler Street and Adelaide Road that building there, which is 1920s.
Hey, wow.
Do you remember that building being there? Do you remember Mount Barker Mitsubishi being in that building?
Yeah, I do.
Do you remember the statue being there?
I don't remember
So
the statue
is now down
photos.
by the first aid of the ambulance station.
Yes,
now.
of course, yeah.
So he was in the middle of the main road, that statue, and they had to move him because people were running into it.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
Yeah,
is
no.
it?
So he, cut a long story short, my grandpa moved at 18 to Mount Barker from Strath and opened Gilbert Motors in Mount Barker, and his father kept running Gilbert Motors at Strathalbyn.
Okay.
And my grandfather, when he built the dealership, then built his family home next door.
Wow.
So my grandfather, and then my father was born, he grew up on Adelaide Road, which is now the car park between Millie's and OTR.
Yes,
That was,
of course. Yep.
I don't know if you remember, but Mount Barker, well, I was not there, but it was it was only a very quiet town in the 20s. In Strathalbyn was the major location. It was a big commercial, agricultural town.
Yeah, of course.
And Mount Barker just happened to be a place on the way to Strath.
Isn't that interesting
Yeah.
how it's changed?
Yeah. So now, obviously, Mount Barker is one of the fastest growing places in the country.
Yes.
So moving on from there, they began to sell. So they had two outlets, Strathalbyn and Mount Barker. They opened up a Holden dealership. So 1940s, the Holden became Australia's first car.
Yes.
And they opened up a dealership in Strathalbyn, Woodside. So we're Woodside, Strathalbyn and Mount Barker. And continued on like that for several decades. It wasn't until the early 80s when Toyota became available. So that was only not that long ago, really.
No, it's quite recent.
Yeah. In the whole scheme of things.
Yeah, and considering all that history.
That's right. So they took on Mitsubishi and Toyota in about 83, 85.
Okay.
So I wasn't really cognizant of it. I was down at boarding school and come home every couple of weeks. Because I was born and bred in Mount Barker myself.
Yes.
And then in grade 6 went down to town to boarding school.
Okay.
That's a whole other story. Another podcast.
Yeah, we'll do
about
a
the family history.
podcast.
Yeah. So that was 85, I reckon. They took on Toyota, and it was actually was Fred Tanner Motors that they purchased.
Oh, right.
And it was down in what is now the car park of Mount Barker Central.
Yes.
And it was just a big shed.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, it settled on a Friday night, and on the Monday morning, Dad was opening up the Holden dealership. I've missed a step in there, Michael. At some point, they moved the operations of Holden from the corner of the main street up to 57 Adelaide Road, where we are today.
Ah, of course, yeah.
And Mitsubishi was on the corner, and Holden was up the road.
Mm-hmm.
Then sometime in about 85, they bought Adelaide Hills Toyota, or Fred Tanner Motors, and Dad was unlocking the door up at Holden, and he said, "Shears, we've got that new Toyota joint down the road." There was no market share, like 3% market share, and Holden was like a 60% market share or something. Mm. And so Dad said, "I'll go down and sweep up." So he opened the door at Fred Tanner Motors, now Adelaide Hills Toyota, and there were no customers, and I think there was only one staff.
Wow. And
he got an A4 piece of paper, and he wrote "Toyota dealer now open," and he photocopied it, and he cut it up, and he walked around the main street and putting it under people's windscreen wipers.
Okay.
In 85. And he had
Love the hustle.
Yeah, it's great. And he still would think I need to hustle more, but he then got a fellow drive his Corona in at 10 o'clock in the morning for a headlight globe. And Dad said, "Oh, it'll be here after lunch." He then got in his car and drove to Dudley Park, which was the head office of Toyota, collected the headlight globe, drove home and fitted it to the guy's car, which was his first customer.
Wow. Good service.
Great service. But he continued to hustle. He continued to hustle, and eventually the dealership was moved up. They bought the Ford dealer, Ford Motor Co, which was on Adelaide Road, mm-hmm. which is 24 Adelaide Road, and they moved Adelaide Hills Toyota up to Adelaide Road. So it's next door to Mitsubishi.
Gotcha.
Story continues on. I went to uni out of school. Mm-hmm. Lucky to get any sort of degree, but I did pass with an arts degree in politics and geography, and was sitting around at the end of uni, and everyone had degrees. Someone had a graphic design degree, someone had someone had an economics degree, and what are you going to do, Michael, with your graphic? Oh, I'm going to be a graphic designer, and everyone around the circle, and they got to me and said, "Tom, what are you going to do with your degree?" And I said, "Well, I'm basically unemployable. I've got a politics degree. It's not really anything you can go and get a job at." And someone said, "Don't you have that family business in Mount Barker selling cars?" And
just that little thing.
Yeah, and I went, I've never been without work. I'd always worked, even when I was at uni, I was, Focus Video. I don't know if you remember Focus Video, but I used to work at Focus Video.
Wow.
I worked on the console of Barker BP, and so I always had a job.
Yeah.
So being without work was uncomfortable after uni. So I rang Dad one morning. I don't know why I rang him because I was living at home. But I rang Dad one morning and said, "You got any work?" He said, "Sure." And you've got to remember, in the context of the family business, he was one partner and he was working with his, the co-owner was my Uncle Grant, and
yes. And
they had probably 60 employees, and so to employ his son was a kind of a political thing.
Of course.
He didn't do it lightly. Mm. And he said, "Yeah, sure. Do you want to sell cars?" And no, I'm probably too good for that. I don't want to be a salesman. He said, "Well, it was good enough for me. It was good enough for your grandfather. And it was good enough for your great-grandfather." And I went, "Oh, okay. Oh, I guess I could sell cars."
Fair point, Dad.
Yeah. You got me there. And he said, "Oh, good. I'll see you Monday." And I went, "Oh, no. I can't possibly start Monday. I'm on holidays." And he said, "Don't you dare tell me."
You're in sales now. You don't have holidays.
No, you don't have holidays. "Don't you dare ring me looking for a job and then tell me when you're going to start." He said, "See you Monday." So I did. So I rocked up Monday, and that was 1993.
Wow. And
Toyota, we were doing 10, 12 cars a month in 83, and everything was by hand and writing up everything manually and manual contracts. And
no DocuSign back then.
No DocuSign. No, it was all pretty rudimentary. Well, it's all we knew.
Of course, yeah.
And one thing that was evident, and it was evident to Dad, which was his motivation to buy Fred Tanner Toyota, was the product. Mm. Toyota were building stuff that just left the local manufacturers behind. And I'm talking about, for example, in the mid-80s, when they're selling a VK Commodore with a blue motor in it, which was a very basic straight 6-cylinder petrol thing with fuel injection tacked on the side. You had Toyota selling twin overhead cam, 4-valve per cylinder, made in Japan, Cressidas and things. So the difference, they're more expensive, but the difference in the technology and the quality was huge, and Dad saw that, and that was the motivation. So I started selling cars in the 90s, basically, and I never thought that it would be a career. I just thought it would be like a stopgap until I found something better. But I really found to enjoy it, as I'm sure you enjoy your job.
Yeah, very, very similar. But I can see the passion coming from you, and I know how passionate you are. I mean, I love. It's really interesting hearing the family story about obviously the hustle of getting the name out in the beginning, and then, as you were saying that, I'm thinking about all these great videos that you're on social media talking about the next initiative for your business. It's fantastic. So
it is good.
It goes through you.
And again, you think of it, and I'm just trying to verbalise it as I think about it.
Yeah.
You had Dad here. He was a passionate Holden bloke.
Yes.
He grew up selling Holdens all his life. Then to switch brands to go to Toyota, because it was a massive thing for him, because he saw an opportunity. And we'd grow up watching Bathurst in the 70s, watching Brocky go around with Holden jackets on, and we were Holden people. So for him to make that switch, because he saw an opportunity that he thought would benefit the motoring public and the business and the employees, was a pretty big deal. So I started selling cars in the 90s and actually really enjoyed it. And it was probably later in the sort of 90s, 2000s, when I started becoming cognizant of the fact that if I was going to, buy a house or have a career, then this is what I'm going to do.
Yep.
And I don't suspect I noticed at the time, but Dad was probably grooming me to take over.
Yep.
And I then sort of became in a position of management and sort of moved up the chain a bit.
Yep.
And then in 2018, after working in the business for years, got an opportunity to buy the whole place. Yeah. So Sally and I made a decision in 2018 that we saw our future as Toyota dealers, and we have a great relationship with Toyota, are a multinational company. Although
huge.
Toyota Australia is fully owned subsidiary of Toyota Japan, and despite their size, they're a wonderful, wonderful partner, and they have different pillars, and their main pillar is respect for people.
Awesome.
The second one is continuous improvement. And so they're the banners that sort of you aspire to in your business and we aspire to in our business. And it is all about, we sell cars, but we're in the people business.
Oh, you certainly are. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I just echo these values with Toyota, and we've just been blessed to grow up in Mount Barker, which is a burgeoning town. We've got a great product. We've got some great employees. We're passionate about, as you are, being in the hills. We're passionate about, I guess one thing I wasn't ready for when you buy a business is the responsibility of employing all these people.
It hits you?
It does. It really does. So,
How big's your team now?
Our team is 40 at Toyota, and then about 18 months ago we bought, when we bought the real estate that we're on, we inherited Gilbert Crash as a tenant.
Yes. And
Dad's retired. He said, look, you've got to do something with the crash shop. Either you buy it or we'll shut it down, and it's a great fit to our business.
Yeah, it is.
We sell spare parts to it. We got often dent cars, so it's someone to get cars fixed on the weekends. And it employs 20 people, and they're great. And there's some of the people have done their apprenticeships there. I've got Nino Chereri. He went to school with my brothers. He did his apprenticeship with us. I guess he's 55 or 56. He's worked for us all his life, his whole career.
How good's that?
It's great. So it's a great sense of pride to be able to pay all those wages on a fortnightly basis, and the superannuation and the work cover and everything that goes with those employment expenses. But I wasn't prepared for that when you sign the forms. Yeah. It's like suddenly the realisation is, wow, I've got all these families, because from each employer there's a family hanging off of that.
There is, yeah.
That rely on us to feed and clothe and mortgages. But it's also a great sense of pride that we have to. So yeah, 60 in the team.
Yeah, it's a good sized team.
Yeah, many of which have been with us, all their careers. I took one of my fellas retired a few days ago, and I took him across to the pub for lunch, and sitting at the table there was like 120 years experience or something,
Awesome.
I've done 30 years, Rob Cooper done 30 years, my general manager.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it all goes very, very quickly.
It does,
doesn't it? You know?
What's been the secret? Do you think, like just with obviously that's so much loyalty from your team? What's been the secret? Do you think?
I grew up watching Dad.
Yeah.
And I had the privilege of working with Dad, and I learned a lot of my that's it, not morals, but not trade. Attitude.
Yeah.
And I would watch Dad walk in the door in the morning, and he'd say, "Oh, good morning, Michael. Good morning, Delise. Good morning, Katrina. Good morning." And he would stop and he would chat and he would make eye contact, and I think it's just about again, respect for people.
Yes.
And never thinking you're above anyone. You know, just being humble.
Yeah.
And Dad was so good at treating people like that, and Dad could talk to whether it be Alexander Downer or one of the detailers or anyone in between, you know,
Yeah.
and he would treat them the same.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's just that respect for people, and he was also a very good communicator, and would ask questions and show an interest, a genuine interest.
Yep.
And I think, fortunately, I've got a couple of those traits, which has helped me manage my team. So we're very much an open door. You know, I'm very much not the boss. You
Yeah.
know, I'm there to facilitate everyone else's job.
Support everyone.
Support
else.
everyone, yeah. And I can go around the whole place and I can tell you everyone's name, and maybe not their wives' names, but most of them I can. And we really, really have got a great bunch. So last week, you know, I was away on annual leave, as I believe you were.
Yeah.
I had another manager away. There was a few days there when we had no managers in the place, and it still ran beautifully.
Yep.
You know, and we've got, you know, as like everyone else, we've got some illness away at the moment and close contacts and COVID cases, and it's been a real challenge in that regard. But I think because of the team we've got, it still manages to run. And I think if that's a sign, I think of a good team is that it can run without the manager being there, or without me being there. It still works.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. No, you should be congratulated, and just seeing all this history that's led to then your leadership moment as well.
That's a very, very good point you make, because I never ever take it for granted that I built this business. I've maintained it, and certainly we're growing, but it took 4 generations prior to me being there that have built this foundation that I've drawn on. So you've made a good point, and it's really important to me that on a daily basis it's funny when I walk in and I'd turn on the lights in the admin department. I've got great-great-grandpa Stephen, great-grandpa Wally, Grandpa Roy, Uncle Grant, and all little portraits of them, and morning, boys. Still here. Lights
are still on.
Lights are still on. And I do. You look inward and say, am I doing the best I can on a daily basis?
Absolutely.
Would my grandfather be proud of how I'm operating?
Yeah.
And whilst it's not true every day, most of the time
it's they take the average, right?
Yeah, exactly right. It's like you say, lights are still on. So
yeah. Oh, look, I can relate to that. I mean, obviously we've had a 22-year history, not quite the history that you've got, but relative, you know, in terms of what Dad started here, and you know, continuing that legacy. It's really important. It is.
Yeah. And I think if you've got some of that, maybe on a daily basis for someone that walks in the front door, one of your customers, it might not mean a lot, but if you're personally operating in a manner that your father would be proud of you, and in a manner that created some success with him and the previous generations, I think then your customers are going to benefit from that. So whilst whilst on a daily basis, your 5 generations of dealing with the public doesn't mean anything to someone who walks in the front door, there's probably a cultural component of that which does affect them.
It's a big foundation.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, so it's good.
Awesome.
It's fun.
Congratulations. So from here, Tom, obviously the current environment, we're coming out of COVID, but we're still dealing with, particularly in your industry, what have been some of the big challenges you're seeing on a daily basis?
Good question, Michael. I mean, and look, there have been some challenges. I remember that, if I just hark back to when COVID hit, was March 20, I reckon.
Yep.
I remember when it first hit, and do you remember the feeling of utter despair that we thought the world was going to end?
Yeah, we had no idea what was going to
happen. We had no
happen.
idea. And I remember people ringing and saying, "Oh, you know, Mr. Nitsky's on the phone, he wants to cancel the Land Cruiser on the showroom floor. And I was going, because one of our biggest expenses is carrying stock.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm going, oh, okay, well, no, we have a legal contract with Mr. Nitsky, but morally, there's no point. You wouldn't carry that through. There's just no point. If Mr. Nitsky's lost his job as a graphic designer with Penfolds, then he can't afford the car, so there's no point pushing it.
Yep.
And then meanwhile, someone else is ringing up. Mr. Smith wants to cancel the RAV4, or Mrs. Jones wants to cancel the Yaris. So this panic started setting in. And meanwhile, I remember taking a phone call for someone cancelling a car, and meanwhile the truck's pulling up out the front with more stock. And I'm thinking,
can you just turn it around?
Yeah. And in our deal agreement, you take the stock that you've ordered. So it'd be nice to turn it around, but you can't.
Right.
So this panic. I remember I ride mountain bikes regularly with a group of guys, and like you, I'm quite talkative, quite lively. And I remember one of the boys said one night, "You all right?" Because I was dead silent. I was panicking. And so at about that time, someone sent through a funny email. The emails were still going around, and it was quotes of famous people, and I received a quote, and it was attributed to Winston Churchill, although it may not have been him, and it said, "Fear is a reaction, courage is a decision."
Yeah.
And I thought, shit, that relates to me right now.
Yeah.
I'm fearful, so I cut it out and stuck it on my computer, on the frame of my computer, and I thought, right, we need to attack this in a positive fashion, and we did. And I started coming up with a plan of, we had a bit of JobKeeper, and we had a bit of this, a bit of that, and we had, payroll tax, payroll tax gave us some of that off, and the various different things that were available to us, and then I started hearing that other people were demanding their drive cars back from their salespeople, and laying people off for days on end, and I thought, guys, we're not going to do that. And I said to my team, no one here is going to suffer financial pain until I do. So no one's going to go without. I said, guys, I want the bonnets up every day. I want the flags out. I said, when you're walking from building to building, walk out. I said, I want people to see activity here.
Awesome.
And it really worked. We remained upbeat. People. We had a couple of lockdowns, but we were always available to people because we still had the RAA running and the crash repair business running. And anyway, we got through the worst of that, and now we're dealing with the fallout of COVID, which is not having a lot of people around the place on some days.
Yes.
Have you had the same issue?
We have, yeah. You sort of end up with almost a third of your team at any one time.
That's right.
Down, and also, so we were talking before about obviously wanting the truck to turn around with this new supply coming in at the start of COVID. Well, is there any supply chain pressures now?
So this has come full circle now, and I think when people realised, they couldn't travel overseas.
Yeah.
I read somewhere, and you don't quote me on this, but Australians in 2019 spent $60 billion overseas. Okay. So there was $60 billion in 2020 and 2021 floating around our economy that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
In round figures, and it's probably offset by visitors coming here. But and suddenly people realised that the sky wasn't going to fall in.
Yes.
Maybe they were going to buy that new car. Maybe they were going to buy that caravan and do a trip around Australia. And what's happened now is a lot of businesses actually have, in a perverse way, benefited from people not travelling.
Yes.
And there's been some horrible people that have lost businesses too, like hospitality and cafes and restaurants, which has really suffered badly. But a lot of retail businesses have done quite well.
Yeah.
Reflecting housing prices and all that sort of stuff.
Real estate's been very strong.
Real estate's been strong. So on the back of that, we have experienced an upturn in demand. Of course, when COVID hit, we told them to turn the factories off. Stop, no more cars.
Slow it down.
And they did. Well, it's a big beast to turn that machine back on again.
Yeah.
So it's taken a long while to catch up. So the answer to your question now is yes, we have backlogs on all sorts of models of cars. Some of them for 1 to 2 years on high demand stuff. Like they released a 300 series Land Cruiser right in the middle of COVID, and there was a pent up demand for that anyway.
Yeah, there would have been.
Let alone the increased demand because people couldn't travel. So it's been a perfect storm in lots of ways. So really one of our biggest challenges at the moment, other than managing the business with a shortage of staff, is managing customer expectations on when they can see their car. Because, you know, if it was me and I bought this new lovely shiny car, you know, I just want to be in it. You know, I don't want to sit on it. I don't want to wait for 12 months. That's
challenging.
It is. It's challenging, and it's a good problem to have. Like we've got, you know, we've got an order bank, but again, the challenge will be managing customer expectations going forward. But we're hoping. I think it's just slowing up now. Demand is slowing up a little bit now, so hopefully the factories will get a chance to catch up.
Yeah, and we'll get back to a level of normal at some point.
It's abnormal.
Hope,
it's so abnormal.
It's fascinating. I didn't realise the timing of when you took ownership, but really almost immediately thereafter, it's been a pretty wild ride
Correct.
for you.
Yeah, it has. It really has. Yeah, no, I've had the same conversation with another mate recently that, you know, we had the whole sky falling in thing and a heap of debt and big decisions and not knowing what was going to happen. I tell you, that one quote coming through on my computer changed my whole.
It's an awesome quote.
Yeah, and I probably should have looked a bit deeper and found a bit of spine, Gilbert spine in there as well. But I saw that and I thought, look, we've got to own this. I've lost my train of thought, but it was about the coming full circle in the backlog of cars. But I think the market's just starting to slow down a bit. I remembered what it was. You know, it's the first time in history that I can remember where you can drive out in a new car and sell it for more than you bought it for.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. That's
unbelievable.
Fascinating.
It's not right.
No.
It's not. It shouldn't be like that.
No.
And the fact that it is means that the things are out of whack. And house prices, I mean, it's fantastic for vendors. It's probably harder for younger people to get in at the moment.
Well, it's hard. Yeah, I was only chatting to Daniel, our podcast producer, off air, but about the fact that, you know, everyone's thought, gee, real estate's been great for you guys. Well, it has. However, there's challenges. I mean, we've had buyers that have missed out on 20 houses before they can finally get one. Really, we've got tenants that can't get a property because there's nothing available. Yeah. So we've got to get the balance back.
The balance is right, because you also don't want it to go too far the other way, where we've all got stock and no buyers, and it's just a really weird time. And I've never seen it like this before, but it's really weird. The other thing is, you know, we a service. You know, we just can't get enough. We've got enough people. We just can't get enough throughput because we're booked out now in service for 2, 3, 4 weeks. Paddle shop, we're booked out till October. It's just unheard of to have this demand on our services. So it's good and bad. And of course, when you are managing a business, when you have a shortage of staff, the pressure gets put on the people that are still there, doesn't it? So the people that are at the coalface are really putting up with a lot. Because, you know, we book in a certain amount of hours every week, and suddenly you get 3 techs that have got COVID. Absolutely shouldn't be at work, stay home, isolate. But the work doesn't, you can't ring those people and say, sorry, come back in 6 weeks' time.
No, because you've also got other jobs behind it as well. So, wow.
So it's been a real challenge, but again, we've got great people in the right roles, and I think that it's not wrong to say it, but the sting has kind of gone out of COVID.
Yeah.
But it hasn't. We're all a bit too relaxed. And I think, you know, the opening up of borders, the no more lockdowns, the scrapping of mask mandates, the high vaccination rates, everyone's going, oh, we're through.
Yeah, it's over.
But it's not over, because we've still got X number of people away, and there's still, you know, there's still a risk out there. And I don't want to overplay the COVID thing, but it does have the capacity to affect your business in a negative way.
It does. But Tom, you should be congratulated for how you've survived and thrived through. Well,
we're still here. Like you said, the lights are still on.
And I think there's many factors. You talk about the Gilbert grit and determination, and then you know, great quotes that you found along the way. But I think it's the people piece that's really shone through. That's what's got you through. That's true. I mean, we've all travelled. Yes, it's great to go to the snow for a week, but could you live there? No. And everywhere you go, you think we're so blessed to live where we live. We've got, you know, clean air and you know, it's a beautiful, great lifestyle. Sure. We've got a great group of friends. You know, I could walk out my front door and walk 50 feet that way. I've got a mate there, another friend there, and you know, you meet people walking past your front gate at home and have a chat, and Yeah.
You know, I was just talking on the way to school, since we've been living where we're living, there's a fella that walks every morning to the bus stop.
Yep.
And I'd never met him before. We moved in and I started meeting him. It's Matt. Now, we're now great mates. I saw him this morning. And
Matt the Walker.
Yeah, but he comes to the Mount Barker he loves the Barker Hotel when he goes to the Bridgie for a snitty, and he's always wearing this. And he's been to my house for a drink, and he walked down one night with some, what did he bring down? Some sashimi one night, and had a couple of wines. And this is only from walking past the front gate, right? But it's indicative of the Adelaide Hills, and I think we're just so lucky to live where we live. We've got the Flinders Ranges, we've got the Murray River, you've got the coast. You can zip across to the Victorian Alps, you can zip across to, the West Coast, Eyre Peninsula.
You're right.
We're so lucky.
We're
so lucky, and that's what comes home to me, is we're just blessed to live and work in Adelaide Hills and, do what we do.
Well said. Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure having you on the Nitschke podcast
Thanks,
today.
Michael.
Thanks for your time.
Great pleasure.
And we'll catch you again really soon.
Yeah, look forward to it. Thanks for the opportunity. It's been great to catch up.
Thanks, mate. Good on you.
Ta.